This is on ways as an employee and employer how to protect your company from cyber threats. And these tips will also help you in your personal life as well. So I always like to begin these with just a quick introduction, especially when I attend a webinar. I'd like to know who I'm listening to. So for me, I've been doing IT for over 30 years. I'm Kirk Lesser, president and owner of Renaissance IT Consulting. I've been in technology for decades and have been consulting since 2005. I hold computer science degree and various certifications as well. And then with Renaissance, we are a business technology provider that have been in business since 2010. So one question I always seem to get asked is, we're small business. Why are people doing this? Why do people ransomware? Why do people breach? And the answer is very easy, because it's where the money is. And just to give you a quick stat, cyber criminals made over $6 trillion in 2021. And to put that into context, that is more than the revenues of Microsoft, Apple, Google, Meta, and Tesla revenues combined. And even beyond that, you could probably throw in a couple of other large companies to equal the amount of money that cyber criminals have made. So how is it a threat to your particular business or to your employer's business? Well, businesses fall to ransomware every 11 seconds. Just in January alone of 2022, over 1.2 million Microsoft accounts were compromised. On average, it takes companies 196 days to detect a data breach or some other type of breach inside their network. The average breach costs a company $7.20 per minute. So if you take the average data breach and multiply that, that's over $2 million for a company. 60% of these companies that experience a data breach or cyber attack close within 6 months because they do not have proper protections in place, or their reputation damage is such that they lose business to the point that they have to close their doors. Is there anything you can do to prevent it? Well, there is. And what I'm going to show you are 5 ways to help prevent breaches. Why? Because employees alone cause over 85% of their company's cyber attacks. The first is we'll take a look at identifying social engineering emails. Second is unique and complex passwords. Third is multi-factor authentication. Fourth is phishing, and I'll explain what that is. And fifth is taking your time. So first is social engineering emails. How to avoid falling for emails that are sent to you. So this is a phishing email that is being shown. A few ways you can detect and see that it is phishing or social engineering attack. Well, first is that over 97% of breaches are as a result of something like this. So examine the entire from email address. It may look legitimate. You may get something from Microsoft or Office 365, but the last part may be off by a letter or may include a number instead of the usual domain. So instead of Microsoft, you may have M1 CRO, Microsoft, or it may be micro with 2 O's soft. Here you can see it's on Microsoft.com. Secondly, don't click on any attachment that you receive right away. The source of the email may say, this is important to open up invoice, overdue invoice, and looks like an invoice PDF. Don't open it. Watch for overly generic content and greetings. Dear customer, dear valued customer, employee, those are too generic. And cybercriminals will send batches of these, and that's why they use generic introductions. Cybercriminals thrive on urgency. Like, you've won, invoice overdue, password's going to be locked out, your account's going to be suspended, things like that. They thrive on immediacy, because then you're not going to take the time to look at things. So anything that says like invoice due now shows urgency and may be a social engineering attack. Notice misspellings. Many times cybercriminals don't use spelling filters. Many times they try to use this to get past spam filters as well. For example, what's included? There's no apostrophe here. So you can look at an email if it looks weird, especially if it's supposedly coming from someone you know, and they're using weird spelling, may very well be a phishing attack or a phishing email. Carefully check all links. You can hover over a link on an email and it will show you where it's actually going to. If it doesn't look like it's going to a bank, if it doesn't look like it's going to Microsoft, and if you, or in this case, it's going to what they would call an IP address that is full of numbers, that is a malicious link, and do not click on it. Also, check for secure websites. Any web page that you enter personal information should have a URL with HTTPS. S stands for secure. If you notice in this sample, there is no S here. That is an additional reason not to click it. So with that being said, we'll move on to passwords. So different and complex passwords prevent takeover of multiple accounts. A few statistics here. 51% of people use the same password for work and personal accounts. 57% of people who have been scammed by phishing attacks still use the same password. 25% of adults use ABC123, password, welcome, I love you, and 11111 as passwords. Cybercriminals use scripts to guess usernames and passwords every 39 seconds. 81% of company data breaches are caused by poor passwords, and 80% are from reused logons. So how do you combat this? One way to prevent a domino attack is to use password managers. And I've listed a few here. There are other ones that are out there. But what I mean by a domino attack is that a cybercriminal gets access or somehow gets your username and login and password for a service. Let's say it's a banking site. You're using that for your mobile phone, for Verizon, for AT&T. They suddenly can get into that. They then use that to get into your email, and so on and so forth. I have literally seen attacks where someone had compromised credentials, and within 5 minutes, they lost their credit card, their bank, their email, and their phone because the passwords were suddenly changed because the hackers got access to them. So please be sure to use unique passwords, and password managers assist with that. So the other thing to do is, if you are not using a password manager, is to at least make complex passwords. So think of passwords that you use in your everyday, whether at work or at home. This chart shows you how quickly a hacker can brute force, not even without trying to compromise, just a brute force attack on your password. So you can look at the number of characters in a password and how quickly a cybercriminal can gain access. If they're just using numbers, or you're just using numbers, you're only using lowercase letters, a combination of upper and lowercase, upper and lowercase with numbers, and then if you add symbols in the last column. And as you can see, it's pretty frightening how quickly these passwords can be compromised today. And people say, well, I don't like entering complex passwords. And my response to that is, it does not have to be impossible to remember. You can use a phrase like, if you went to college, that your college is #1 exclamation point, or some sort of reminder like, I like to eat ice cream in bed. Things like that can be entire phrases. It makes it much more difficult for a brute force attack to work on a sentence or a phrase as opposed to numbers and letters. So you don't need to think of like W at sign #1 exclamation, which is very hard to remember to begin with. This makes it a little bit easier in creating unique passwords for each of your services and sites that you go to. The third thing is multi-factor authentication. You've probably heard that term used quite a bit, and it looks like a number of you, as I will end the poll, use it as well. So what is it? Essentially, it is multi-factor authentication. It's possession, your phone, knowledge, something you know, like a password, and then being, fingerprint or retinal scan. Microsoft, Google will use a multi-authentication where you log in with something you know, a password, and then it will text you something on your phone, your device, something you have to put in that code. More and more companies are employing even a third, which is using a fingerprint or retinal scan to even prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the code that was received is in fact you. Why should you care about multi-factor? Because Microsoft estimates that using multi-factor authentication can reduce breaches by up to 99%. And people say, well, it's always a problem for me to enter a code, or why do I have to do this all the time? Well, a code to enter is a nuisance, but the bigger nuisance is having to look for another job because your company got ransomware because you did not have multi-factor authentication turned on. Fourth thing is to be aware of vishing attacks. Vishing is not phishing in a virtual world. It's a form of phishing using a telephone call or SMS text to try to deceive a prospective victim. What are the different types of hooks? And I'm sure you all have experienced at least one, if not several of these. Banks. This is your bank calling. We need to contact you because your account will be closed. Please provide us your account number information to validate that it's you, your password, and suddenly you realize that your bank account has been drained. Again, sense of urgency. Government, IRS is the most common one. We have a warrant out for your arrest because of IRS overdue payments. Please contact us immediately. And suddenly you're being scammed because you feel like it's an IRS agent calling you when in fact it isn't. There are other government fake attacks, sometimes with immigration. I've seen them with other types of forms of government, but those two are the biggest ones. IT support doesn't happen as much usually with larger firms, but for instance, my company is not going to call an individual user and go, I need your username and password to log into your account. Honestly, we can reset your passwords anytime we want to gain access to the account if we wish. So if someone is calling you suddenly out of the blue, saying that they're with your technology provider, that they're with your IT management, before you provide any information, I would call the provider or your IT manager or department directly to say, did you just call me needing this information? Probably 9 times out of 10, it's not valid. Law enforcement, this is the other one where we have a warrant out for your arrest. Please contact us immediately. Otherwise, we will come to your house and arrest you. Sometimes you'll see the ploy of we've identified certain activities on your computer that may be in violation of FCC or child porn or things along those lines. I have seen some of those. Those are scams. The cops are not going to call you directly. They will come to your house. Big one is Microsoft. If Microsoft calls you, they are not Microsoft. I hate to tell people, but you're not a snowflake in this world that Microsoft cares about you. They will not call you that you have a virus on your computer. With the billions of number of devices they have out there, they are not going to call you about a virus or an update that you need to install and that they need access to your computer. That is a scam. In the same note, your internet provider is not going to call you to ask for your router login because of an issue that they're having updating your router. They can do whatever they want with your router if they need to. Them calling you is definitely a scam. So the last thing I will bring up, and as you can see, this is tying up what I've talked about before, is taking your time. Cyber criminals thrive on instant gratification. Take a time to look at links and emails. Examine it. If it doesn't look right or feel right, then most likely it isn't. Examine where the email came from. Again, take the time. Don't just assume that it's Microsoft or somebody sending you an email that you need to open an attachment immediately. Big one here is in emails, especially if potential breach, is that a cyber criminal may have gotten access to a vendor email and then suddenly is asking you to make a payment to them on an account number. Make sure that the account number, especially with wire transfers, is matched. If an email appears weird, feels weird, just has a strange vibe, call the sender. Ask them, did you really send me an email saying that you needed money immediately? Did you send me this invoice? That 2 minutes of time could save a huge amount of downtime. Take time to create unique passwords. Again, just using the same password over and over again is probably faster, but it's definitely less secure. Multi-factor authentication adds time to logins, but saves compromises. Yes, it is a nuisance. Yes, I curse whenever I have to enter in a number or code, but in the long run, it's saving my company as well from potential compromise. And phishing is based on urgency. Don't give in. You have a virus, you have a warrant, your account's going to be locked out, you've lost money, something along those lines. That's where cyber criminals will take advantage of. Remember, you can't go back in time when a breach occurs. Otherwise, you'll be out of time. I am adding one more component to this, is I did notice that there are some employers here. I expand on this on my YouTube channel. I have 2 other videos on breaches and how to prevent them, as well as some other components to this, but I will lightly touch on this. More and more insurance companies, compliances, and even banks, venture capitalists are requiring more cybersecurity. And just a few things that you can do. One is education. Phishing tests, basically sending out fake phishing emails to see who's falling for that, and then educating those people on proper usage, what to look for. If you do phishing testing and training for over a year, it has been proven to drop by 95% an employee falling for a phishing or malicious email. HR policies, make sure you've got policies in place. What's the discipline if someone's falling for phishing attacks repeatedly or failing tests? What are computer use agreements? What can people do or not do with work-related or non-work-related computers? Accounting policies. These again, especially with electronic funds transfers, do you have a policy in place of approval process? If something comes in where someone needs to wire money, who gets to approve it? Who has to look it over? Do you have a code phrase that validates that it's an actual wire transfer need from the president as opposed to somebody else. It's something that I've kind of infused with companies that I work with, is add a phrase. It can be something like, how is the weather over there? Or are you going to go see the game this weekend? It's very innocuous, but it's a keyword that if you don't happen to see it in an email supposedly coming from the president, then it may be a scam or someone trying to drain the company funds. So that may be something that you wish to add to your policies. Prevention, filtering, spam filtering, domain filtering, and network filtering. So a good firewall, spam filters, whether it's from Microsoft or some third-party provider. Domain, there are some ways that your IT department, your technology provider can set up to help filter out some phishing. It's called DMARC/DKIM. And again, if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them later. Updates and patches. This thing, I can't tell you how many times we go to a new client and that they have not had updates or patches for 6 months. There are vulnerabilities that are coming out all the time that cyber criminals use that can get around other prevention methods. By simply updating and patching, that can help close out some of the simplest issues. Alone, Microsoft patched over 1,000 flaws in its products in 9 months. So that should go to show you that there's a lot going on there. Encryption, both on the computer side, that if a laptop is stolen or taken, that it cannot be used. And then email. Email goes out, it's like regular USPS mail. You put a letter in a mailbox, it eventually gets to its destination, but anyone along the way could open up the letter and read the contents. That's like email. There are ways to encrypt it, so that way during the process from getting from sender to receiver, that it cannot be read. And finally, recovery. Backup disaster recovery is a huge one. Make sure these days that there is a policy in place, but as well that the backups you have both on-site and off-site are ransomware proof. There are ways that if someone is trying to encrypt your backups, that it can block it, or start deleting files off of the backup, it will block it. You also want to make sure that if you are backing up on-site, that you are backing up to 2 separate geophysical locations off-site. Cyber liability insurance. This is becoming more and more of a requirement. Whether or not you want to have it, it's going to be needed, especially if you have a bank or insurance broker getting in your face. Unfortunately, it's becoming a requirement, and it can help save you a lot of time and money if you do experience a breach or ransomware. And then finally, a cyber incident response policy. This is also becoming more and more of a requirement. And essentially, it's basically a document that if something were to happen inside your business, whether it's a breach, ransomware, who gets contacted when, and that is between your insurance, your legal, your marketing, your employees, who's involved, and what steps are taken, not only to recover from a breach, but then also what are the lessons learned to prevent it from happening again. So with that being said, I am open for questions if anybody has questions. If you need to go, I completely appreciate that. My information is below. You can email me at kirk@renitconsulting.com, or you can go to our website at www.renitconsulting.com.